find out more, and head on over to supertalktv.com because we're going to find out more about Mississippi State University's role in moving towards AI and automation in agriculture. Pretty cool stuff. And joining us to tell us a little bit more is Dr. Thomasson. He is with the Department of Agriculture and Biological Engineering. So welcome.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going well, and I think this is a really neat topic. Number one, we know that Mississippi State has always been leading the way in agriculture. And number two, though, watching it sort of expand into these other technologies and bringing that into the industry, to me, is a really cool thing. So let's just get started with AI and farming. How did those two worlds kind of combine where you sit?
Yeah, great question. So just for everybody's clarity, AI is artificial intelligence, and it really kind of comes into farming when you think about the term precision agriculture. And I guess I'll try to give a little bit of clarity on what precision agriculture is. It's really the idea that instead of farming the way that we have historically, where a farmer might, if he's growing corn, he might grow his corn in the same way across all of his farm fields. What we began to learn and began to have the capability to do something about in the 80s and 90s was that different parts of fields are quite a bit different. The soils are different. The elevation is different. The moisture holding capacity of the soil, the number of weeds, the number of insects in those places can be different. And so what we really want to do is optimize for every area of the field the way that we're doing the farming. So that can be in terms of irrigation, it can be in terms of putting out fertilizer, or any of the other things that we do on farm. We want to optimize them at as small a level or as precise a level as we can. And so we call that precision agriculture. Precision ag really takes three things to be successful, and one of those is data, and one of those is the analysis of the data, and the last one is the physical act of doing something with the decisions that you've made. So the analysis part is where artificial intelligence comes in. Historically, what we've done is we've collected a bunch of data and we've manipulated the data somewhat manually, using software or what have you. But now we're asking the software to sort of manipulate the data, analyze the data on its own, and make recommendations to us. So that's where the AI, the artificial intelligence part, comes in.
That's super interesting because I would think anytime that you can remove, I guess, room for error when it comes to either the data collection or the data analyzing or just the time it takes to do all that, you're improving the efficiency on the farm, which then is going to improve, their yield production or whatever it is there may be. And with only 1%, I think it is, of the population feeding the rest of us 99%, they need all the help that they can get. So this is like a really important tool for farmers these days.
It is absolutely. There are a couple of thoughts there. One is that the population worldwide is still continuing to grow. There is hope, there is sort of an end in sight. We expect that the population growth will sort of flatten out around the end of the current century. But between now and then, we're probably going to have a couple of additional billion mouths to feed. So we need to be able to produce more food. And the amount of farmland that we have is really restricted. So we have to be able to produce more yield per acre going forward to feed those additional people. And, you have issues with the climate that can affect your ability to produce. You have wars going on in foreign countries that can stop production in those countries. And so we really have to have great ability to maximize what we're able to produce per acre.
How is Mississippi State leading the way in this? How are you guys really showing up on a national or either an international stage with this AI in agriculture?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. Mississippi is a small state, and Mississippi State University is a relatively small university. But when you start talking about agriculture, as you mentioned in the beginning, we're known for agriculture. As a land-grant university, we're also known for engineering. My department happens to be where those two colleges come together, agricultural and biological engineering. And the university has been producing new research, new seed varieties, new chemistries for herbicides and so forth for many decades. And we were one of the early players in the whole concept of precision agriculture, probably starting in the mid 1990s. And that was really all based on the ability that people began to have to use GPS. You know, GPS was sort of designed for the military, but it became publicly available in the 1980s. And all of a sudden, people realized, you know, if we can use a GPS unit to identify a specific location in the field and keep coming back to that location, this gives us tremendous new capability. And so GPS is really the essential element, or positioning, I should say, is really an essential element to precision agriculture. Mississippi State jumped on that technology and that line of research in the mid 1990s and has been at the forefront of that research along with several other universities. But we've been known for having a strong precision ag program for, 25, 30 years now.
I love that, Dr. Thomasson, when the two different things collide, because oftentimes you'll have kids say, oh, I don't want to be a farmer. I'm not into agriculture. I'm not this, I'm not that. Even though every day we eat, we think a farmer, or every day we put our clothes on, we think a farmer as well. But it seems like now there are so many different avenues to get into the field of agriculture where it really doesn't even you're not even on the farm necessarily or in the field, but you can have a huge impact on feeding the world or helping the farmers who do.
Yeah, that's true. And if I could just give a quick shout out to my department, the Agricultural and Biological Engineering Department, we have 3 majors in my department. One of those is biomedical engineering. And often when I say that to people, they say, but you're sort of working on things that relate to agriculture and natural resources. And I say, well, we're a little bit broader than that. I like to think of us as engineering for human well-being. And so people need adequate quantity and quality of food and fiber. They need a good environment, and they also need good health care. And so when you think about it in those terms, we have a lot of interesting things to work on, to study, to do research on for a lot of people. And as you say, when you start talking about some of the modern technologies in agriculture, there's all kinds of possibilities. So you can think about the effect of agriculture on the environment. If we put out fertilizer, where does it end up? Does it end up helping the plant grow, or does it get washed away from the field and end up in a river where it presents some problems? Those are the kinds of things we study. We also, with these new technologies, are using a lot of artificial intelligence, which is basically computer science-based studies. We use a lot of electronics. You think about drones and robots and mechanical systems. So really, it's a very broad field. People interested in agriculture can be interested in soils, they can be interested in plants, they can be interested in animals, or a lot of the tools that we engineers like to bring to the table to make those things work better.
I love some of the cool things on the horizon there you mentioned was agriculture autonomy. Am I getting that correctly? And that's bringing in robots to the farm. And I feel like this would be a lot of fun for a lot of students to realize if you like robotics or you like the STEM, you can really be helpful in moving along that technology. Where does that fit in?
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue, and it's really where I've put a lot of time and effort over the past couple of years since I've been the head of this department. One thing I'd just like to mention along the way, I saw a graphic recently that showed that the investment in so-called ag technology, a big part of which is around agricultural robotics, was about $30 billion in the United States in 2010. And by about 10 years later, it was about $300 billion. So in the course of a decade, we multiplied the amount of investment in ag technology tenfold, and it's getting faster and faster, and robotics is growing tremendously. Some of that is based on the fact that a lot of autonomy, if you will, and when we say autonomy, what we're really meaning is the ability for machines to act on their own without human intervention. So they might be collecting data or using data that have already been collected and using artificial intelligence to make decisions on what to do with the data that they have, and then being able to physically make something happen. That can be driving from point A to point B without running into something. It can be applying fertilizer to this plant but not to that plant. And those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. In those huge investments that are beginning to be made in agricultural autonomy, you're starting to see companies like Google, like Microsoft, like IBM investing in these technologies. And that was never really true in the past. I mean, I've been an agricultural engineer for what 35 years or so now.
Dr. Thomasson, we're
And
going to
really,
pause real quick, and we're going to come right back to that coming up next here on Good Things. Mississippi.org, and head on over to supertalktv.com. You'll see we're finishing up our conversation with Dr. Thomasson. He is with the Department of Ag and Bioengineering there at Mississippi State University. They are helped to lead the way in agriculture autonomy as well as precision agriculture. I feel like I'm learning all these new vocabulary words today, and there should be a quiz at the end of this. But I wanted you to finish what you were talking about, these large corporations making these huge investments in robotics, particularly for agriculture. And I think prospective students need to know what all is out there in terms of options of career. And there are a lot of career options in this area.
that's right. Yeah, just to wrap up that thought, we've seen probably in the last 5 to 10 years just tremendously more investment by large corporations in agriculture. Agriculture, I heard somebody say, "Oh, that's just sows, cows, and plows," right? Well, no, it's not just sows, cows, and plows. It's a lot of really exciting new technologies, all the way from genetics up through robotics and everything in between. And so, I think there are great opportunities for students in our department and other agriculture departments and also other engineering departments on all of these types of technologies. But what's really exciting, I think, to me personally, is this whole idea of autonomy in the robotics area. If you look around the world and you see what the age is, of the average age of a farmer, I think in the U.S. is about 55 to 60 years old now. And if you look at migrant farm laborers coming into the country, their age has been rising steadily over the years. And so what we're finding is fewer and fewer, even though the population is rising, fewer and fewer people are particularly interested in doing farm labor. I mean, it's hot, it's hard. There are other things that people would prefer to do with their time, and we can often get machines to do what people would do, and sometimes do it in ways that people wouldn't be able to do it that are better.
And better is, one thing that we all want when it comes to our farming and our agriculture, hopefully to help, drive down some of those prices that we see at the grocery store. Dr. Thomasson, I think that's where so many of us are. They're like, if robots will help do that, let's lead the way sort of in it. But you bring up a good point. I mean, so many factors go into farming. It's not just the labor or the farmers itself. It's also, our environment, our farmland, and everything in between. So it's a little bit more complicated, but it sounds like there is options there at Mississippi State in terms of students getting involved. Where can they go if they want to learn more information?
Well, I guess I would say they could come to our website, which is the Department of Agricultural and Biological Engineering at Mississippi State University. They can also reach out to me directly if students. You can find my contact information on the website. And if they're interested in studying in the ag autonomy area, I'd be happy to provide them more information. You mentioned briefly, and stop me if we don't have time, but where are the jobs going on in the future?
Yeah.
If you talk to any of the major ag machinery corporations like John Deere, like Case New Holland, like AGCO, they are all hot on the heels of the whole ag autonomy idea. They're purchasing other companies that have begun to develop autonomous tractors and that kind of technology. So there is tremendous opportunity ahead for students who would be interested in this kind of thing.
And they don't have to leave home. They can stay right here in Mississippi and go to Mississippi State, which I think
true.
is always,
And,
yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that's, with the way that work is often done virtually now, there are growing opportunities for that kind of work in an engineering environment that we work in. Writing code and testing things and doing this virtually can be quite interesting.
Well, I love it. If I could go back to school, I think I would be so interested in all the STEM, all the coding, all the things. And so, you never know. Life's still long and short and all the things in between, Dr. Thomasson. I may wind up in one of your classrooms. I'll be the weirdo in the back taking my notes.
We'll follow up afterward.
I'd definitely like to get to the farm and see some of the robotics. I think that's super cool. I appreciate your time, and I encourage folks, if they're interested in it or have students interested in it, to follow up with you guys and see what all's going on there at Mississippi State. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All of that right here in Mississippi.